The title of this was actually done out of a collaboration with University of Southern California, University of California, Los Angeles, and University of California, Irvine. So all in Southern California. Just really excited to see this type of research being done. And also, for some of us, it really kind of helps to validate many of the exercises that we're doing, right? And we're not just kind of sitting around saying, all right, let's just breathe because we have nothing else to do, but that what we're learning, not only does it affect our nervous system, but it also can affect things such as possibly developing dementia and Alzheimer's and cognitive decline and improving cognitive functioning and things like that. And so people are starting to look at this. And like I said, this research is really gonna take off. And it has been over the last 6 to 12 months. And so I will follow it. So, I encourage you to follow it as well, but I will follow it. I will follow it from a scientific perspective and really kind of bring you those articles, and we can discuss it. But again, it's really about trying to find your own practice around this, and as opposed to waiting for anything, for any research to come. People have been practicing breath work for millennia, and even though they didn't know, let's say, the mechanism of why it was beneficial, they felt it, right? It was an authentic, it's sort of like, I feel it. I don't need to know the mechanism. This is what I feel, et cetera, et cetera. And so therefore they practiced it. And here now we're getting to the mechanisms. People are looking at different things. And so if you want to follow along, we're gonna investigate this paper in detail. All right. So first of all, the title of the paper is Modulating Heart Rate Oscillation. So modulating is being able to change, right? So like if you get into your car and the speaker's really loud, you can modulate the volume, right? You go to the dial and you go, and the volume comes down. The dial is a modulation. If you want to change the radio station, the dial part that changes the radio station can modulate what frequencies the antenna will interact with. Right? A thermostat is a modulator. So modulating, so changing heart rate oscillation, affects plasma amyloid beta and tau levels in younger and older adults. What amyloid beta is and what tau is, amyloid beta, everybody, whenever in the early days when they were doing autopsies and biopsies of brains of people who had dementia, Alzheimer's dementia, what they found is they found these amyloid beta plaques. They called them plaques because they literally looked like plaque on a section of a brain. And when they looked at what protein was there, it was amyloid beta, and what they called these tau proteins, these tau tangles. So they call them amyloid beta plaques and tau tangles. And what happened is that these are naturally forming proteins. And what happens is that they start to aggregate, they start to come together and form plaques and tangles. And people thought that people think that's the pathology of Alzheimer's, is that you get these plaques and tangles forming, and then that causes neurodegeneration. All right. Some of the newer theories that are coming out are essentially saying that's so downstream from where we're at that we've completely missed the whole mechanism, and that maybe the mechanism is that as we age, our brains get less good, whatever you want to call it, at getting rid of toxins and debris. And so therefore, because our brains get less good at doing that the toxins aren't removed, and they just start to aggregate. And these are the ones that we just happen to see. Okay, so therefore we actually need to learn techniques and strategies and whatnot to help remove those toxins. And one of those was actually showing that sleep is important, because sleep, when we sleep, we get flushes of cerebrospinal fluid, which is a clear fluid that bathes the brain. We get flushes of cerebrospinal fluid through the brain itself, and it cleans out all the toxins and all the debris that builds up just from using our brain. And so therefore, now people think, well, wow, that's why sleep is important. So we need to get good sleep. And the cerebrospinal fluid comes in and cleans out these toxins. And so what they wanted to do here is, so modulating heart rate oscillation affects plasma amyloid beta and tau levels in younger and older adults. Right. So heart rate oscillation is equivalent to heart rate variability, which we've discussed a number of times. Right. So what we're looking at is anything that oscillates, goes up and down, up and down, up and down, or any sort of variability. And what we've discussed in the past is a healthy nervous system, a healthy, resilient nervous system, has an increased ability to oscillate. It has an increased ability to go up and an increased ability to go down, an increased ability, and it's got this flexibility, it's got this resiliency, right? It's not that we just stay in one state and we can't move. That's a very fixed nervous system. We actually have a very dynamic, fluid, oscillatory nervous system. Okay, so it goes up and it goes down, and that's actually very balanced. And this is perfect because in every moment to moment, when our heart beats or when we breathe, we're actually triggering the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous system. And it's sort of a seesaw, right? So imagine when you breathe in, it's the sympathetic nervous system. When you breathe out, it's the parasympathetic nervous system. When you breathe in, it's the sympathetic. And our heart rate, because our heart rate is also governed by the nervous system itself, that the heart rate does the same thing. So it goes up and it goes down. So imagine like a little seesaw, right? Okay, so just in the title, right? Modulating heart rate oscillation. We have the power to modulate our heart rate oscillations. That's number one. We can teach people how to actually have an increased oscillations of the heart rate. Isn't that amazing? So just that, right? You're like, wow, that's cool. I can actually do something consciously, willingly, that actually can increase my heart rate variability? Yes, we can, and we've talked about this numerous times. Then what they did is they looked at, well, if we teach people how to do this, because we can't go into the middle of their brain and take a sample of CSF, because that's very invasive, but we can do what we call a venipuncture and get some blood from the arm. Can we teach people how to do this, right? Can we teach people how to increase heart rate variability or increase oscillations? And then can we look at biomarkers, biological markers that are in the blood that are found in people with Alzheimer's, which for them was amyloid beta and tau, right? And can we actually see a change in these markers? All right, so can we affect the breathing? Can we affect the heart rate variability through breathing exercises? And we teach people how to do that. So yes, okay, great. We've taught people how to do that, and they can do this. Yay! Okay, now, if they can do this, can we see any downstream effects of this? In the blood of biomarkers of Alzheimer's dementia, including amyloid beta and tau. Okay, so slow-paced breathing via heart rate variability biofeedback stimulates vagus nerve pathways. So that sentence, although it sounds very intense, you should all know what that means, right? From everything that we've talked. So slow-paced breathing, Heart rate variability biofeedback stimulates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve being the main nerve that controls the parasympathetic nervous system, right? So although I said no one size fits all, maybe in breathing it does, where if I was to give any recommendations to people, it would be slow, deeper breaths. Slow, deeper breaths. At anytime you think about it, take a slow, deeper breath. Okay. Slow-paced breathing via heart rate variability biofeedback. And if you're very interested in biofeedback, okay, if you're very interested in actually getting feedback as opposed to just doing it and trusting that it works, is HeartMath. If you've never heard of HeartMath is a company that creates these. They you can get them, you hook them up to your phone, and they actually monitor your heart rate variability. And so for like $100 or something like that, you can get their basic one. They send it to you. It's a little device. You connect it to either your earlobe or your finger, and then you get heart rate variability biofeedback, and where you can actually see your heart rate variability. So if you're interested in that, HeartMath, I don't work for them. I make, again, no money from selling their devices at all. But it really is the best that I've found out there. Okay. Stimulates vagus nerve pathways. So parasympathetic nerve pathways, right? That counter, right? So the vagus nerve pathways that counter noradrenergic stress and arousal pathways. So noradrenergic, we're talking about epinephrine, adrenaline pathways, and those are all the sympathetic system, right? So we're, again, parasympathetic, sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic, right? This dance, this seesaw, okay? Vagus nerve pathways that counter. Okay, so we elevate this and it counters the adrenergic, we'll call it sympathetic, stress and arousal pathways that can influence production and clearance of Alzheimer's disease related proteins. Thus, we examined whether heart rate variability biofeedback intervention affects plasma levels of amyloid beta and tau. They randomized healthy adults, 108 of them, to use slow-paced breathing with heart rate variability biofeedback to either increase their heart rate oscillations, so to increase heart rate variability, or to decrease heart rate variability. Okay. They practice for 20 to 40 minutes daily. All right. 4 weeks of practicing had large effect size differences in changes of plasma amyloid beta levels. 4 weeks of practicing 20 to 40 minutes. Here's the crazy part. If you increased your heart rate variability, they saw decreased amyloid beta levels in the blood. If you decreased heart rate variability, meaning bringing less resiliency to the system, they saw elevated amyloid beta in the blood. Here's the cool part. When they saw the decreased amyloid beta, they saw decreased gene transcription at the DNA level. So there was less of the genes, less transcription of the genes at the DNA level that were being activated, that were causing less stress proteins, that were then causing less amyloid beta production or increased removal. Okay? Like, you're affecting the ability of your genes to be transcribed. All right? And that's probably why they said, well, it doesn't, the biomarkers, even if you have it, well, why is that? Well, because even if you don't have the biomarker, but the gene is ramped up, right? Well, what are we going to say from a research perspective? Well, you don't have an increased risk. Well, yes, you do, because your gene is ramped up. Now, let's say you do have the biomarker, but you're doing these exercises that actually decrease gene transcription in real time. And it's like, well, I got the biomarker, but I'm actually doing these exercises that decrease gene transcription. Okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you understand the power of this. Okay, this is enormous. This is ginormous. This is huge. Okay, you can actually do a practice on a daily basis that changes the expression of your genes. Okay. All right. So just so that they go into it a little bit more, we still have some decent time. Alzheimer's disease incidence rates. That means how many people are diagnosed with Alzheimer increases exponentially with age. Why does aging increase Alzheimer's disease risk? One potential critical factor has been given little attention because everybody was focusing on the pathology. Everyone was focusing on these things that were already found. Like, it's like, oh, there's a lot of garbage there. Well, then the garbage is what's causing the disease. Well, no, how did the garbage get there in the first place? Right? What caused the garbage to accumulate? One potentially critical factor has been given little attention. During aging, the balance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic branches shift. As people get older, parasympathetic activity declines. Okay. Parasympathetic activity declines, as indicated by decreases in heart rate variability. At the same time, sympathetic activity increases, as indicated by increases in sympathetic nerve activity and circulating noradrenaline levels. So the adrenaline is increasing, right? Age-related increases in adrenaline activity and decreases in parasympathetic activity are associated with Alzheimer's disease-related conditions, including sleep disorders, diabetes, and heart disease. So you sleep. If we don't sleep properly, we're not clearing the toxins well. Increased stress leads to heart disease. We know that. Increased stress leads to glucose intolerance. If we take in glucose, we actually, if we're stressed, we're not able to break it down. We're not able to utilize it as good as well. All right. So that's why they say that when we have this shift, all right, I don't care how old you are. We should all be having practices that help us balance our parasympathetic and sympathetic activity. And since the majority of us live in this world and we're constantly bombarded with things like, COVID and inflation and storms and floods and et cetera, stress is elevated. And so therefore, we need a daily practice that helps bring balance to that. Okay, that helps bring balance to that. Okay. They also go, however, so countering adrenaline activity could help decrease amyloid beta release in the brain. Predictions involving tau proteins are not straightforward, whatever. Similar to, however, research indicates that anesthetics that lower sympathetic activity, animal studies suggest that arousal states, so how aroused we are, affect brain waste clearance by modulating, right, changing the effectiveness of the pathways which transport the cerebrospinal fluid and flush the waste from the brain. This transport was increased when we were able to sleep and was increased when we were able to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and you get greater CSF penetration into the brain. Together, these studies suggest that enhancing parasympathetic activity rather than improving sleep or directly stimulating the vagus nerve has the potential to reduce amyloid beta and tau levels. So essentially, balancing, right? Doing exercises. Some people are like, I can't sleep well. Okay. But what can you do during the day when you're awake, conscious, that can help increase that parasympathetic activity, right? Even ask yourself, have you asked yourself lately, how am I doing today based on my sympathetic, parasympathetic balance? How am I doing, right? Have I done any parasympathetic exercise today? Have I done any? If you come see me, I'm going to ask you, how many parasympathetic exercises have you done? And you're like, huh? I go, okay, come back. I believe it was who was it? Dr. Weil. Dr. Weil. He was out of Arizona. Andy Weil. He actually went to Harvard. Published a paper back in the 60s on marijuana. Andrew Weil, yes, Andrew Weil, started one of the first alternative and complementary fellowships here in the United States. Fascinating gentleman. He says, whenever he'd get consults to see him when he was a clinician and practicing, he says, you got to come off sugar, flour, eggs, dairy, get good sleep, start exercising 20 minutes a day, meditate for 20 minutes a day, no caffeine, and do that for 3 months. If you still have the symptoms, then I'll see you. I was thinking of I was going to do the same thing. I got a consult. Yeah, I know it's very complicated, but look, do this for 3 months. And if you still have the symptoms, I'll see you. But if you don't, he didn't see anybody. No, I don't know what is. Okay. Are you getting my point? I hope you are. As much fun as we can be having here. All right. What'd they do? 54 young adults. 54 split up between male and female. Age was distributed between older. They had similar 54 older adults, 54 younger adults. What's their all right, so what they showed is, as you can imagine, I'd like to talk about the methods. So they started people. They did cognitive tests. They did emotional tests. They did blood collection. They did saliva collection. They did a 5-week intervention. 5-week intervention, 20 to 40 minutes. Heart rate variability. And the goal of the heart rate variability biofeedback was to increase heart rate variability. They also gave the same machine, and then they actually told people, we want to decrease your heart rate variability. So they do things that decreased heart rate variability. Okay, now how did they increase? So this is important. Okay, how did they increase heart rate variability? Okay, well, you've heard us talk about this as well, right? Scientists they've actually tested this, and they figured out this 10-second one breath interval, right? That you breathe in for 5 and out for 5, in for 5 and out for 5, is ideal. Sort of like this perfect, it increases heart rate variability maximally. Okay. So what they did is they had these participants, and we've done this too, right? Because not all one size fits all. And so you got to kind of find your timing, right? 5 is a little too much, or 5 in is perfect. And then I like to do 7 out, right? Like 5 in, 7 out. Now you're at 12 seconds. Okay. So they had their participants try 5 different breathing cycles from 9 to 13 seconds. Okay, so somewhere a little shorter than 10, right? Somewhere a little longer than 10, going out to 13. And so I do encourage you to sort of try this. We've done a couple of these that in the past, way long. I was counting 1, 2, 3, 4. Some of you may remember, some of you doesn't matter, but we did. All right, so imagine going 9 to 13 seconds. So 9 seconds, 10 seconds, 11 seconds, 12 seconds, 13 seconds. So 5. And you're actually being quite exact when you do this. There's a lot of apps on the phones or these things where you breathe in for 4 and you breathe out for 7. Or you breathe in for 4 and you breathe out for 8, right? Now you have a 12-second cycle. Does that make sense? Okay. So now go out and find what works for you, right? The one that works for me is actually a shorter inhale and a longer exhale. Shorter inhale, longer exhale, right? That just works for me. And then I have a pause. Shorter inhale, longer exhale, pause. Shorter inhale, longer exhale, pause. Shorter inhale. That just works for me. I've done it. Right? I've done different ones. 5 and 5, when you're in a real 5 in and 5 out, for me, when I'm in a real sort of like relaxed state, is like way too fast. It's like, breathing too quick. Okay, and selected the pace that produced the largest amplitude oscillations at the breathing frequency. All right, so they went from 9 to 13 in every individual. And what they did is, because they had biofeedback, what that means is that they were getting information back from their own system. What they did is then they chose the breath that produced the greatest variation, what we call increased heart rate variability. Right? So if you have a really nice variation, that's increased heart rate variability, that shows a very dynamic, resilient increase with your sympathetic and decrease with your parasympathetic and increase with your sympathetic and decrease with your parasympathetic. Okay. All right. Okay. And that's what they did. All right. And what they showed is that there was decreased amyloid beta and tau in the blood in people who had increased heart rate variability over a 5-week practice, 20 to 40 minutes a day. And it affected their gene transcriptions of genes that transcribe stress proteins. Holy mackerel. Is that the coolest thing? All right. This study was published March 13th. All right. This is cool stuff. Okay. And again, you have your breath. It's yours. Use it. Right? Use it energetically. You can activate, right? If you're feeling sluggish, guess what? You can activate. You can use your breath to bring in some sympathetic, right? Rapid breaths, rapid shallow breaths, focusing more on the inhale than the exhale. If you're feeling really anxious, panicky, nervous, stressed, well, you slow and deep. Focus more on the exhale, right? So we can use our breath. We can actually have a very, 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 very powerful relationship with our breath and recognize, what am I doing right now? Am I holding my breath? Oh my God, I'm reading and I'm holding my breath. I was watching Fox News and I was holding my breath. Guess what? Watching Fox News, stress, holding breath, stress, double stress. Congratulations. You got I went to Baskin Robbins. Could I get a double scoop of stress, please? That's exactly what I want in my life today. Now what happens? Now you're increasing your heart rate, you're increasing your blood pressure. And imagine, right? All of a sudden you're changing the transcription of your genes that actually express more stress hormones. Crazy. Okay? But that's essentially what we're asking, what we're doing in that. This is putting mindfulness, this is putting breath, this is putting heart rate variability, vagus nerve, balancing the parasympathetic and the sympathetic activity all into one and all into a simple exercise that we can do that is absolutely free to all of us. Right? And if I'm on a plane, I have it. I don't need to look in my pocket for it, right? That's the cool part. It's like I'm waiting in line. Oh, my breath. I'm on the plane is taking off. I got my breath. right? Whatever it is, I'm on the roller coaster. I got my breath. I'm talking to somebody and they're stressing me out. I got my breath, right? We'll go into our practice, but I hope you get the sense. This is really powerful, really important. All right. I don't say this lightly. I would teach everybody on the face of this earth these practices. Okay. This is like, all right. Okay, so now let's go into our practice. And finding a comfortable position that works for us. With the breath, we can go anywhere. Be sitting, lying down, standing, walking. Does not matter. Closing your eyes if you feel comfortable closing your eyes. If not, having a soft downward gaze, looking off on the horizon, over the ocean. And just allowing yourself to be here now. Giving yourself permission to do this practice. That there's no place you need to be, no place you need to go. And taking 2 or 3 deep breaths, and with each in-breath, bringing in the present moment, this moment right here, and with each out-breath, releasing any tension you may notice in your body. And then breathing regularly for whatever pace works best for you. And bringing your attention to your anchor. A place that you can direct your attention to that you feel safe. This can be your breath, or it can be a word, phrase, spiritual figure, an animal, a burning candle, a plant, a flower that you pay attention to. And as your mind wanders from this place that you choose to direct your attention to, you notice your mind has wandered and you simply come back to your breath. Now, using the article we just read, and as you focus on your anchor, whatever the anchor may be, breathing in, inhaling in a nice cyclical manner, inhaling and exhaling, inhaling in and exhaling out, inhaling in and exhaling out. And see if as you do this practice, you can just slow it down just a bit. Maybe you extend the exhale a little longer. Whatever works for you. Just see if you can slow it down just a little longer, just a bit. And as your mind wanders, which is exactly what the mind does, just for this practice, choosing not to follow the mind. Either going back to your anchor, to your resource you feel comfortable going to, or going back to the breath, slowing it down as best you can. Not to feel out of breath, but simply slowing it down. And just noticing where your mind is now. And knowing that as you're slowing down the breath, inhaling and exhaling, that you're actually increasing your heart rate variability. That you're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. That you're exercising the parasympathetic nervous system. You're strengthening that part of the nervous system to help bring resiliency to your whole system. Not only are we increasing our heart rate variability and exercising our parasympathetic nervous system, we're also directly affecting our DNA, the transcription of our genes, simply through this practice. You may even imagine or visualize your DNA changing in real time. The transcription of your genes changing. As you breathe in and out in a nice, slow, deep, cyclical manner. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. And as you breathe, imagining all your genes coming alive, and how your breath is actually informing them, directing them. Bringing balance to your system. Directly through your breath. Breathing in, I know I am breathing in. Breathing out, I know I am breathing out. Breathing in, just this breath. Breathing out, just this breath. And now taking 2 or 3 deep breaths. And just noting how you feel after doing this breath practice. And seeing if you can integrate any part of this practice into your daily life. And opening your eyes if your eyes were closed. Reorienting yourself to your room and surroundings. And just taking a moment to reflect on your practice.